The dust of Hayrim 4 tasted like iron and broken dreams. Kang Do-hyun wiped the sweat from his forehead and looked up at the orange sky. Somewhere beyond those clouds, ships traveled between stars. Somewhere out there, the galaxy was alive with wonder and war and things he could only imagine. But here, in the mining pits, there was only rock and heat and the slow grinding of machines. Do-hyun was 17 years old. His hands were already rough from work. His father worked beside him every day, and his father's father had done the same before that. This was what humans did on frontier colonies. They dug. They survived. They did not dream too loudly. The alarm came without warning. A deep horn sounded across the colony, and everyone stopped working. Do-hyun climbed out of the pit and saw people pointing at the sky. 3 ships were descending through the clouds. They were not human ships. They were too elegant, too sharp, like blades made of silver light. Valorian ships. Do-hyun felt his stomach tighten. Everyone knew about the Valorians. They were one of the great powers of the galaxy. They had conquered dozens of worlds. They were taller than humans, stronger than humans, faster than humans. Their skin was pale silver, and their eyes held the cold light of distant stars. The Valorians did not come to places like Hayrim 4. There was nothing here worth their attention. The colony leader, a tired old man named Supervisor Kwan, rushed to meet the ships as they landed. Do-hyun watched from a distance as the doors opened and the Valorians stepped out. They moved like predators, smooth and confident. Their armor shone in the sunlight, and then she appeared. Do-hyun did not know her name yet. He did not know that she was Princess Yuna, daughter of Empress Soren, heir to one of the largest empires in known space. He only knew that she was the most beautiful and terrifying thing he had ever seen. She was tall, like all Valorians. Her silver skin seemed to glow from within. Her hair was white as moonlight, pulled back in a warrior's style. She wore armor that fit her like a second skin, and she walked like someone who had never been afraid of anything in her entire life. Their eyes met. It was an accident. Do-hyun had not meant to stare. But he had been looking, and she had turned her head, and suddenly her golden eyes were fixed on him. Every other human in the colony had lowered their gaze. That was what you did when Valorians looked at you. You made yourself small. You showed submission. You hoped they would pass you by without trouble. Do-hyun did not look away. He did not know why. Perhaps he was too young to be properly afraid. Perhaps something in him refused to bow. Perhaps he simply could not tear his eyes from her face. The princess tilted her head slightly. Her expression did not change, but something flickered in her eyes. Curiosity, maybe, or amusement at his foolishness. Then she turned and walked toward the main building with her guards, and the moment was broken. The Valorian convoy had suffered engine damage passing through a debris field. They needed 3 days for repairs. 3 days with Valorians walking among them like gods among insects. The humans of Hayrim 4 were terrified. Do-hyun was fascinated. He found reasons to be near the main building where the Valorians had set up their temporary headquarters. He carried supplies. He delivered messages. He made himself useful in ways that kept him close. On the second day, she noticed him again. "You," she said. Her voice was clear and sharp, like a bell made of ice. "The one who stares." Do-hyun's heart pounded, but he did not run. He turned to face her. "I apologize if I offended you." "I did not say I was offended." She studied him with those golden eyes. "I said you stare. Most humans cannot meet my gaze for more than a moment. You looked at me like I was just another person. Are you not?" The question hung in the air between them. For a moment, Do-hyun was certain he had made a terrible mistake. Guards would come. He would be punished for his disrespect. Instead, Princess Yuna laughed. It was not a cruel laugh. It was surprised, almost delighted, as if he had said something genuinely unexpected. "What is your name, bold little human?" "Kang Do-hyun. Kang Do-hyun," she repeated, as if tasting the words. "And what do you do here, Kang Do-hyun?" "I work in the mines." "A miner." She looked at his rough hands, his dusty clothes, the exhaustion that lived permanently in his young face. And is that what you wish to be? A miner on a forgotten colony until you die? No one had ever asked Do-hyun what he wished for. People like him did not get to wish. They got to work. No, he said quietly. I want to see the stars. Over the next 2 days, they spoke whenever they could steal moments together. Yuna would ask him about human life, about the colony, about what it meant to be small and weak in a galaxy of powerful species. Do-hyun answered honestly. He did not try to impress her with lies. In return, Yuna told him about the burden of royalty, about expectations that crushed like gravity, about a mother who saw her only as an instrument of empire, about the loneliness of being surrounded by people who wanted things from her rather than wanting to know her. They were nothing alike. She was a princess of conquerors. He was a boy who dug rocks from the ground. And yet, somehow, they understood each other. On the final night, Do-hyun found her alone on a hill overlooking the colony. Her ship would leave at dawn. I want to see you again, he said. The words came out before he could stop them. They were foolish words. Impossible words. Yuna turned to look at him. Her face was unreadable. You are a child, Kang Do-hyun. A mining boy from a world that does not even appear on most star maps. My people respect only strength. What could you possibly offer me? The words should have broken him. They were meant to remind him of his place. Instead, Do-hyun straightened his spine and met her eyes. Then tell me what I must do. Yuna was silent for a long moment. The wind moved through her white hair. The stars burned overhead, indifferent to the small dramas of mortals below. Return to me when you are no longer a boy, she said finally. Become something worthy of standing beside me, human. Earn a name that even my people must respect. Then perhaps I will remember you. She walked away without looking back. At dawn, Do-hyun stood in the crowd and watched her ship rise into the sky. It climbed higher and higher until it was just a point of light among the stars. And then it was gone. His father put a hand on his shoulder. Back to work, son. Those rocks won't mine themselves. Do-hyun nodded. He picked up his tools and walked toward the pit. But something had changed inside him. The princess had meant her words as a dismissal. Perhaps even a kindness. She had been telling him to forget her. To accept his life. To stop dreaming of things he could never have. She did not understand humans. She did not understand that telling a human something was impossible only made them want it more. Kang Do-hyun climbed down into the mines that day. But his mind was already among the stars. He would find a way. He would become something more. He would return to her not as a boy, but as a man worthy of standing beside a princess. He had made himself a promise. And humans always kept their promises. The recruitment office on Harem 4 was a small building at the edge of the colony. Most people walked past it without a second glance. Joining the Terran Defense Force meant leaving everything behind. It meant danger and discipline, and the very real possibility of dying far from home. On his 18th birthday, Kang Do-hyun walked through its doors. The officer behind the desk looked up with tired eyes. He had seen many young people come through here with dreams of glory. Most of them washed out in basic training. The ones who made it through often wish they hadn't. You sure about this, kid? The officer asked. Yes, Do-hyun said. I'm sure. Basic training was brutal. The Terran Defense Force did not believe in making things easy. They pushed recruits until they broke, then pushed them harder. Many quit in the first week. More followed in the weeks after. Do-hyun did not quit. When his body screamed for rest, he thought of silver skin and golden eyes. When instructors told him he wasn't good enough, he trained harder. When other recruits laughed at the mining boy who thought he could become a soldier, he let their laughter fuel his determination. He was not the strongest recruit. He was not the fastest. But he had something that many of them lacked. A purpose that burned inside him like a star, the instructors noticed. This quiet young man from a frontier colony never complained, never made excuses, never stopped improving. He absorbed lessons like dry ground absorbing rain. He asked questions that showed a mind hungry for knowledge. One instructor in particular took interest in him. Admiral Park Ji-seok was a legend in the Terran Defense Force. He had fought in the border wars, when humanity was still struggling to establish itself among the stars. He had lost ships, lost friends, lost his own son to a Korath raider attack. Now he spent his final years training the next generation, searching for that rare spark that could not be taught. He saw that spark in Do-hyun. "You're different from the others," Ji-seok said one night, finding Do-hyun in the training room long after everyone else had gone to sleep. "They want glory, or money, or escape from their lives. What do you want?" Do-hyun considered the question carefully. "I want to become someone worthy." "Worthy of what?" "Of standing beside someone who told me I was nothing." Ji-seok studied the young man's face. There was no anger there, no wounded pride. Only determination. Pure and clear as water. A woman? The admiral guessed. A Valorian princess. Any other commanding officer would have laughed. The idea was absurd. Valorians looked down on humans the way humans might look down on insects. A mining boy dreaming of standing beside Valorian royalty was like an ant dreaming of courting a mountain. But Ji-seok did not laugh. He had learned long ago that the universe belonged to those foolish enough to reach for impossible things. "Then you'll need to work harder than anyone has ever worked before," he said. "Are you prepared for that?" Yes, sir." Ji-seok became Do-hyun's mentor. He taught him things that were not in the official training. How to read enemy movements. How to think 3 steps ahead. How to turn weakness into strength. He pushed Do-hyun until the young man thought he would collapse, then revealed that he could go further still. During these years, Do-hyun studied the Valorians obsessively. He read every report, every analysis, every account of their tactics and philosophy. The Valorians believed in overwhelming force. They attacked head-on, crushing enemies with superior strength and numbers. It was effective, but predictable. Humans could not match Valorian strength, but humans could think in ways that Valorians did not expect. Do-hyun rose through the ranks with remarkable speed. He led his first combat mission at 20. A small skirmish against raiders in the Outer Rim. His squadron was outnumbered. Their ships older and slower than the enemy's. He won anyway. He used asteroids for cover when open combat would have meant death. He feinted retreat to draw enemies into traps. He did things that violated conventional military doctrine, because conventional doctrine assumed equal opponents. His superiors were impressed. Some were concerned. This young officer did not fight the way officers were taught to fight. He was unpredictable, creative, willing to take risks that seemed insane until they worked. "You fight like you have nothing to lose," Ji-seok observed after reviewing the mission reports. "I have everything to lose," Do-hyun replied. "That's why I fight to win." By 22, Do-hyun commanded his own vessel, a light cruiser named the Morning Star. It was not a prestigious ship. It was small and old, and assigned to patrol routes that no one else wanted. Do-hyun made it into something more. He recruited crew members that other captains overlooked. He worked with his sister Yoonji, now a rising engineer in the Terran fleet, to modify the ship's systems in ways that bent regulations. The Morning Star became faster than it should have been, harder to detect, more dangerous than its size suggested. By 24, Do-hyun commanded a squadron. His reputation spread through the fleet. Young officers requested assignment to his command. Veterans who had grown cynical found themselves believing again. They called him the Ghost of Harem. He appeared where enemies least expected, struck with devastating precision, and vanished before reinforcements could arrive. He never lost a ship he didn't mean to lose. He never abandoned crew members in danger, and he never forgot why he was doing this. In his private quarters, Do-hyun kept a small image, a star map showing the route from Hyrem 4 to the Valorian throne world. Every night before sleep, he would look at it and remember golden eyes and a challenge that had changed his life. "Become something worthy of standing beside me, human." He was becoming, day by day, battle by battle. He was forging himself into something new. But the galaxy was changing too. Humanity was no longer the weak species that stronger powers ignored. Terran colonies were expanding. Terran ships were becoming more sophisticated. Terran officers like Do-hyun were proving that humans could compete with anyone. The great powers noticed. Some were intrigued, some were threatened. And far away, in a palace of silver and light, Princess Yuna was growing into a military commander herself. She had heard whispers of a human officer who fought like no one else, who defied odds that should have crushed him, who came from a small colony on the edge of nowhere. She had not asked for his name. She was not ready to know if it was him. But sometimes, late at night, she would remember a boy with dust on his face and fire in his eyes. A boy who had looked at her without fear. A boy who had asked what he must do to become worthy. She had meant those words as a kindness, a gentle way of telling him to forget her. She was beginning to realize that she might have done something far more dangerous. She might have created a monster. Meanwhile, Do-hyun continued his rise. The Terran Defense Force gave him harder assignments. He completed them. They gave him impossible missions. He made them possible. 6 years after leaving HFY 4, Kang Do-hyun was no longer a boy. He was a commander whose name was spoken with respect and fear. He was a weapon that humanity had forged in the fires of necessity. But he was not finished. Not yet. The galaxy was vast, and there were still battles to fight, still heights to climb, still a promise to keep. Somewhere among the stars, a princess waited, and Do-hyun was coming for her. Do-hyun was in his quarters aboard the Morning Star, reviewing tactical reports, when the emergency alert screamed through the ship. He was on the bridge in 90 seconds, his crew already scrambling to battle stations. "Report," he ordered. His communications officer, a young woman named Lieutenant Hana, looked up with fear in her eyes. "Sir, it's HFY 4. The Korath Syndicate is attacking the colony. 3 carrier groups, at least 40 combat vessels." Do-hyun felt the world narrow to a single point. HFY 4. His home. His parents still lived there, along with thousands of people who had done nothing to deserve the attention of the galaxy's most brutal pirate coalition. The Korath Syndicate was not like other enemies. They did not take prisoners for ransom or occupy territory for resources. They destroyed. They burned. They left nothing behind but ash and screaming. "How long until they breach the colony's defenses?" Do-hyun asked. His voice was calm. Inside, a storm was building. 2 hours, maybe less. The colony's defensive grid wasn't designed for this kind of assault. "And how far are we from the HFY system?" 3 hours at maximum speed, sir. Too slow. By the time they arrived, there would be nothing left to save. Do-hyun closed his eyes. He saw his father's face, weathered by years of mining. He saw his mother's smile, the way she laughed when Yoonji sent messages from her engineering post. He saw the dust of HFY 4, the orange sky, the hills where he had stood with a silver princess, and promised himself he would become something more. He opened his eyes. "Push the engines past maximum," he said. "I don't care if they burn out when we arrive. We'll get there in 2 hours." His crew did not argue. They had followed him through impossible situations before. They trusted him, even when trust seemed foolish. The Morning Star screamed through space at speeds that should have torn it apart. Unji's modifications held. The ship groaned and shuddered. But it held. Do-hyun used the time to plan. His squadron was the only Terran force close enough to respond. They had 5 ships against 40. The numbers were hopeless, but numbers were not everything. He studied the Korath formation as his sensors picked it up. The Syndicate commanders were confident, spreading their forces wide to surround the colony from all angles. They expected no resistance. They expected easy slaughter. They did not expect the ghost of HFY. Do-hyun gathered his captains on a holographic call. Their faces were grim. They knew the odds. "We can't win in open combat," Do-hyun said. "So we won't fight in open combat. We're going to use the asteroid belt." The HFY system had a dense asteroid belt between the 4th and 5th planets. It was a navigation hazard that most ships avoided. The Korath had positioned themselves well clear of it. "We're going to fly through it," Do-hyun continued. "And we're going to make them follow us." His captains exchanged glances. Flying through an asteroid belt at combat speeds was suicide. The rocks would tear their ships apart. The Syndicate ships are bigger than ours, Do-hyun explained. They can't maneuver as well in tight spaces. We can. We'll use the asteroids as weapons, as shields, as traps. We'll turn their numbers against them. And if it doesn't work, one captain asked, then we die fighting for our home instead of running from it. No one argued. The Battle of the Harem Belt began at 0347 hours. Do-hyun's squadron burst out of hyperspace directly in front of the Korath fleet, so close that the pirates' sensors screamed with warnings. It was insane. It was suicidal. It got their attention. The Korath commander, a brutal warlord named Vex, snarled orders to pursue. These Terrans had insulted him by appearing. He would crush them personally. Do-hyun ran. His ships fled toward the asteroid belt at full speed. The Korath fleet howling behind them. The pirates saw only prey. They did not see the trap. Inside the belt, everything changed. Do-hyun's ships danced between the tumbling rocks. They knew these patterns. Do-hyun had grown up in this system. He had studied these asteroids as a child, dreaming of the day he would fly among them. The Korath ships tried to follow. The first one to enter hit a rock the size of a building and exploded. The second dodged that rock and flew straight into another, but they kept coming. Vex was too angry to think clearly. Do-hyun used their anger. He split his squadron, drawing the enemy fleet in different directions, forcing them to divide their forces. He positioned his ships behind massive asteroids, then pushed those asteroids into the paths of pursuing enemies. The belt became a killing field. Korath ships died by the dozen. Some were destroyed by rocks. Others were ambushed by Terran vessels that appeared from nowhere, fired devastating volleys, and vanished again. The pirates could not track their enemies. They could not coordinate. They could only die. But it was not enough. There were too many of them. Do-hyun made a decision that would haunt him forever. The Starfall and the Iron Wind, he said quietly. I need them to draw the main Korath force into Grid 7. Korath. His tactical officer understood immediately. Grid 7 was the densest part of the belt. Ships that entered would be surrounded by rocks on all sides. Getting in would be possible. Getting out would not. The Starfall and the Iron Wind would not survive. Sir, the officer began. I know. Do-hyun's voice was steady. Contact their captains. Tell them what I'm asking. The captains accepted without hesitation. They understood. 2 ships to save thousands of lives. It worked. The Starfall and Iron Wind charged the Korath flagship, firing everything they had. Vex, enraged beyond reason, ordered his entire main force to pursue them into Grid 7. The rocks closed in. For 20 terrible minutes, the asteroid belt screamed with explosions. When it was over, the Korath main force was gone. The Starfall and Iron Wind were gone too, along with their crews. The remaining Syndicate ships fled. They had come for easy prey and found a nightmare instead. 18 hours. That was how long the battle lasted. When dawn rose over Harem 4, the colony was still standing. Do-hyun landed on the surface to cheering crowds. His parents were alive. His home was safe. But he did not feel like celebrating. 237 Terran sailors had died following his orders. Their faces would live in his memory forever. He stood on the same hill where he had once spoken with Princess Yuna and looked up at the stars. Far away, the Valorians were watching. A Valorian observation ship had been in the system, monitoring as they always did. They recorded everything. The tactical data was analyzed by the finest military minds in the Empire. The reports spread quickly. A human commander had defeated a force 8 times his size. He had used terrain that should have been a death trap. He had sacrificed his own ships without hesitation when victory demanded it. The Valorian High Command took notice. In the royal palace, Princess Yuna requested the tactical recordings. She sat alone in her chambers and watched a human fleet dance through an asteroid belt, like it was nothing. She watched ships die so that others could live. She watched a commander make impossible choices with steady hands. When the recording ended, she asked for the commander's name. Kang Do-hyun, her aide replied. From a colony called Harem 4. He is known as the Ghost of Harem. Yuna said nothing. She dismissed her aide and sat in silence as the stars wheeled past her window. She remembered a boy with dust on his face, looking at her without fear. She had told him to become something worthy. He had listened, and now the entire galaxy would learn his name. The Threshold was the largest space station in the known galaxy. It floated in neutral space, belonging to no empire, serving as a meeting place for powers that could not trust each other enough to meet anywhere else. Kang Do-hyun had never seen anything like it. The station was ancient, built after wars that had burned across 1,000 systems. Its halls were wide enough to fit ships. Its chambers could hold thousands. Species that had been killing each other for centuries walked these corridors in uneasy peace. Do-hyun walked among them as part of the Terran delegation. It had been 2 years since the Battle of the Harem Belt. In that time, the Korath Syndicate had grown bolder, attacking colonies across multiple sectors. The great powers had finally agreed to discuss a coordinated response. Admiral Jisok had insisted that Do-hyun attend. Many in the Terran leadership had objected. A 26-year-old commander at a galactic summit? It was inappropriate. It was presumptuous. Jisok had overruled them all. The galaxy needs to see what humanity is becoming, he said. Do-hyun represents our future. So Do-hyun put on his formal uniform and traveled to the threshold. He felt the eyes on him as he walked through the station. Humans were still a minor species in the galactic hierarchy. They were tolerated, sometimes even respected, but never considered equals. The idea of a human attending a summit as more than a servant was new, and yet, whispers followed him. That's the one, he heard a Rilaran merchant say. The ghost of Harem. He destroyed the Korath fleet with 5 ships. Impossible, someone else replied. Humans aren't capable of that. Do-hyun kept walking. He had learned to ignore doubt. It could not touch him anymore. The summit itself was exhausting. Endless speeches, careful diplomatic language. Powers that hated each other pretending to cooperate while secretly maneuvering for advantage. Do-hyun sat in the back of the Terran section and watched and learned. He saw the Valorian delegation enter on the second day. They moved like a force of nature, tall and silver and beautiful in a way that made other species seem ordinary. The crowd parted for them. Even ancient powers with fleets of thousands showed respect, and at their head was Princess Yuna. She was more beautiful than he remembered. 9 years had changed her. The young princess had become a warrior. She wore combat honors on her armor. Her face was harder, shaped by campaigns he could only imagine. Their eyes met across the chamber. Do-hyun did not look away. He had trained himself long ago to meet any gaze without flinching. But this was different. This was her. Yuna's expression did not change. But her step faltered for just a moment. So brief that no one else noticed. Then, she continued walking, taking her place at the head of the Valorian delegation. She did not look at him again. The summit continued for 3 more days. Do-hyun attended every session, absorbing information, learning how power moved between species. At night, he wandered the station's observation decks, looking at stars and wondering if she remembered. On the 4th night, he found her. She was alone on a small deck overlooking a dying star. Red light painted her silver skin in shades of fire. She stood perfectly still, like a statue made of moonlight. You should not be here, she said without turning. This section is reserved for Valorian use. Then have me removed. Do-hyun walked to stand beside her. I'll come back tomorrow. And the day after that, Yuna turned to look at him. Her golden eyes studied his face, searching for the boy she had met 9 years ago. You've changed, she said. You told me to. I told you many things. I did not expect you to listen. Do-hyun smiled. It was not a soft smile. It was the smile of a man who had walked through fire and come out the other side. That's the thing about humans. When you tell us something is impossible, we take it as a challenge. They talked through the night. Yuna tested him, just as she had tested him years ago. She asked about his campaigns, his tactics, his philosophy of war. She probed for weakness, for doubt, for the soft places that enemies could exploit. She found none. The mining boy was gone. In his place stood a commander who had earned his rank through blood and sacrifice. A man who had lost friends and ships and pieces of his soul. A man who had looked at the worst the galaxy could offer and refused to break. "You've killed," Yuna observed. "I can see it in your eyes." "Yes. Does it trouble you?" "Every day," Do-hyun met her gaze. "But I do what must be done. That's what commanders do. That's what you do too." Yuna was silent for a long moment. The dying star burned between them. "I watched the recordings of your battle," she said finally. "The Hayrim Belt. You sacrificed 2 of your own ships. I gave an order that sent 237 people to their deaths, and you would do it again. To save my home? To save thousands of innocent lives?" Do-hyun nodded. "Yes. I would do it again. I would hate myself for it. But I would do it." Yuna turned to face him fully. "My mother thinks humanity is a threat. She believes you should be contained before you grow too strong." "And what do you believe?" "I believe." Yuna paused. For a moment, her mask slipped, and Do-hyun saw something beneath it, something that looked almost like wonder. "I believe you are the most interesting thing I have ever encountered, Kang Do-hyun." They met every night after that. They talked about war and politics and the loneliness of command. They talked about their families, their fears, the weight of expectations that pressed down on them. Yuna told him about her mother, Empress Soren, who saw her only as an instrument of empire. About the suitors who wanted her power, not her. About the endless performance of strength that Valorian culture demanded. Do-hyun told her about Hayrim IV, about the dust and the dreams, about a boy who had been told he was nothing and refused to believe it. He told her about Jiseok, about the sailors who had died trusting him, about the guilt he carried like stones in his chest. They understood each other. They always had. On the final night of the summit, Do-hyun asked the question that had burned inside him for 9 years. "I came back," he said. "I became what you asked me to become. So what happens now?" Yuna looked at him with something that might have been sadness. "Now we face reality. The Valorian Empire and the Terran Federation are not allies. My mother would never accept a human in our royal house. Our peoples have never joined in that way. I didn't ask what your mother would accept. I asked what you want." The question hung in the air between them. "What I want." Yuna stepped closer, close enough that Do-hyun could see the flecks of light in her golden eyes. "What I want is to see if you can prove yourself to my entire civilization. Not just to me. To all of them." "How?" "There is an ancient tradition. The trial of blood. Any outsider who wishes to join a noble house must pass 3 tests. Combat. Strategy. Will." Yuna's voice was steady, but her eyes burned. "No human has ever attempted it. No human has ever been permitted to. And if I pass, then even my mother cannot deny your worth." Yuna reached out and touched his face. Her fingers were cool against his skin. "But the trial is designed to break warriors who have spent their entire lives in combat. It may kill you." Do-hyun covered her hand with his own. "Then I'll die trying," he said. "I didn't come this far to stop now." Yuna smiled. It was the first time he had seen her truly smile since they reunited. "I know," she said. "That's why I chose you." The summit ended. The delegations departed. The great powers returned to their scheming and maneuvering, but something had changed. In the halls of the Valorian palace, whispers spread about the human commander who had caught the princess's eye. In the chambers of the Terran Federation, debates raged about whether one man's ambition would bring them closer to the stars or drag them into war. And Kang Do-hyun prepared himself for the greatest challenge of his life. He had promised to become worthy. Now he would prove it. The arena was carved from black stone that had stood for 10,000 years. Pillars rose toward a sky, the color of bruised silver. Thousands of Valorians filled the seats, their pale faces cold with contempt. A human in the sacred arena. The idea was an insult. Kang Do-hyun stood alone at the center of the fighting floor and felt the weight of their hatred pressing down on him. He was smaller than anyone here. Weaker. Slower. Everything about his presence violated their understanding of the natural order. He did not care. Empress Soren watched from the royal box, her expression unreadable. Beside her sat Yuna, forced to observe without emotion. A princess could not show favoritism. A princess could not reveal that her heart was pounding with fear for the human below. Kang Do-hyun of Earth, the ceremonial speaker announced. You have invoked the trial of blood to prove your worth to House Valar. Do you understand that failure means death? I understand. Do you accept the judgment of the arena? I accept. The speaker gestured, and a gate opened at the far end of the arena. A Valorian warrior stepped through. He was massive, even by Valorian standards. His name was Commander Theron, undefeated champion of the Imperial Games. He had killed 43 opponents in ritual combat. His arms were thick as tree trunks. His eyes held nothing but contempt for the small creature before him. The first trial is combat, the speaker announced. The human must survive. Theron did not wait for a formal signal. He charged. Do-hyun had studied Valorian combat styles for years. He knew how they fought. They relied on their superior strength and speed, overwhelming opponents with direct assault. They did not expect prey to dodge. Do-hyun dodged. He moved to the side at the last possible moment, letting Theron's massive fist pass within inches of his face. The crowd gasped. No one moved that close to death voluntarily. Theron spun and attacked again. And again. Each blow could have shattered bones. Each strike could have ended the fight. Do-hyun was never there. He used the arena itself. He led Theron around pillars, making the larger warrior navigate obstacles. He stayed close to walls, forcing Theron to limit his swings. He made himself small and fast and impossible to pin down. It was not fighting. It was survival. But survival was not victory. Do-hyun needed more. He began to strike back. Quick jabs at joints and pressure points. Nothing that could truly hurt a Valorian. But enough to annoy. Enough to enrage. Theron grew frustrated. His attacks became wild. He stopped thinking and started simply trying to crush the irritating human who refused to die. That was when Do-hyun struck for real. He had been waiting for Theron to overextend. When it finally happened, Do-hyun moved inside the warrior's reach. He drove his elbow into Theron's throat, then used the moment of shock to sweep the larger man's legs. Theron fell. Before he could rise, Do-hyun had a blade at his throat. Not a killing blow. Just a point pressed against silver skin. Yield, Do-hyun said quietly. The arena was silent. Thousands of Valorians stared in disbelief. Their champion lay on the ground with a human standing over him. Yield, Do-hyun repeated. Or I'll cut your throat in front of everyone who thinks you're invincible. Theron's eyes burned with humiliation. But he was not stupid. A dead champion was worth nothing. I yield, he growled. The crowd erupted. Not in cheers, in outrage. A human had defeated their champion. It was impossible. It was wrong. But the trial had rules older than any empire. Do-hyun had won fairly. The second trial began 3 days later. This time, the arena was a vast chamber filled with holographic displays. Tables lined with strategic projections. The finest military minds of the Valorian Empire sat waiting. The second trial is strategy, the speaker announced. The human must prove his tactical worth against our greatest commanders. They gave Do-hyun an impossible scenario. A fleet half the size of his opponents, inferior technology, no reinforcements. The Valorian tacticians across from him had centuries of combined experience. The war game began. For the first hour, Do-hyun retreated. He gave ground steadily, pulling his holographic forces back from every engagement. The Valorian commanders pressed forward, sensing weakness. They split their fleet to cut off his escape. That was their mistake. Humans did not fight for glory. Humans fought to win. Do-hyun had been studying the arena's strategic parameters. He found a flaw that the Valorians had overlooked because they would never think to exploit it. A narrow passage between two celestial bodies that larger fleets could not navigate efficiently. He drew the Valorian forces in, then collapsed the passage with simulated demolition charges. Half their fleet was trapped. The other half was scattered, trying to pursue him. Then he struck. His smaller ships tore through the disorganized enemy formation. He sacrificed vessels to block escape routes. He used his own destroyed ships as weapons, ramming them into enemy formations. When the simulation ended, Do-hyun had lost 70% of his fleet. The Valorians had lost everything. He cheated, one commander sputtered. That passage wasn't meant to be destroyed. The rules did not forbid it, the trial overseer replied coldly. The human wins. The third trial was the worst. They took Do-hyun to a chamber deep beneath the palace. They stripped away his weapons, his armor, everything. They left him alone in darkness. The third trial is will, a voice announced. The human must endure. What followed was 7 days of hell. They did not let him sleep. Every time he began to drift off, lights would flash and sounds would scream. They changed the temperature from burning hot to freezing cold. They pumped strange gases into the chamber that made his thoughts scatter. They showed him images. His home burning. His parents dead. His sister captured and tortured. They were illusions, but they felt real. They whispered to him, voices in the darkness telling him he was worthless, that Yuna would never love him, that he was a fool for trying to rise above his station, that he should give up, beg for mercy, accept his place. Do-hyun did not break. When the pain became unbearable, he thought of Yuna's eyes. When the voices told him to quit, he remembered the promise he had made on a dusty hill years ago. When his body screamed for rest, he forced himself to stand. On the 5th day, they sent interrogators. They asked him why he continued. What did he hope to achieve? Why would a human subject himself to this torture for a woman of another species? Do-hyun looked at them with hollow eyes and cracked lips. Because I made her a promise, he said. And I keep my promises. On the 7th day, they opened the chamber. Do-hyun stumbled out into the light. He could barely walk. His body was covered in bruises and burns. His mind was fractured from sleep deprivation, but he was standing. The trial overseer looked at him with something that might have been respect. You have passed the trial of blood, he announced. You are the first human in Valorian history to do so. In the royal box, Princess Yuna kept her face perfectly still. A princess could not show emotion. A princess could not let anyone see the tears building behind her eyes. Empress Soren's expression was unreadable. She had expected this human to die. She had wanted this human to die. He had not. Do-hyun raised his head and looked up at the royal box. His eyes found Yuna's across the vast distance. He smiled. It was a broken smile, exhausted and bloody. But it was real. I came back, he whispered, though she could not hear him. I came back, and she knew. Whatever came next, whatever her mother plotted, whatever the galaxy demanded, nothing would ever be the same. The boy from the mines had become a man, and he had earned the right to stand beside her. Kang Do-hyun survived the trial of blood. He was the first human to ever do so. The news spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. Some celebrated. On Terran colonies, people spoke his name with pride. A human had stood against the mightiest warriors of the Valorian Empire and won. It proved what they had always believed. Humanity could compete with anyone. Others were terrified. In the halls of the Valorian palace, Empress Soren sat alone in her private chambers and considered how to destroy the human who had humiliated her people. The trial of blood had rules older than any living memory. Do-hyun had passed. By law, he had earned the right to stand among Valorian nobility. By law, he could pursue a union with Princess Yuna. Soren could not simply kill him. The ancient traditions would not allow it. Other noble houses would revolt if she violated the sacred laws so openly. But there were other ways to eliminate problems. Meanwhile, Do-hyun recovered from his ordeal in a guest chamber of the palace. His body healed slowly. The trial had pushed him beyond normal human limits. Medical officers were amazed he was still alive. Yuna visited him when she could, stealing moments between duties. My mother is planning something, she told him quietly. I can see it in her eyes. She will not accept this. Do-hyun sat up despite the pain. I didn't expect her to. You don't understand. She has ruled this empire for 200 years. She has crushed rebellions and conquered worlds. She will not let a human stand beside her daughter. Then we'll face whatever she throws at us. Do-hyun took Yuna's hand. Together, Yuna looked at their intertwined fingers, silver skin against pale human flesh. Two species that had never joined this way. Two people who had every reason to be enemies and had chosen something else. I have fought battles across a dozen systems, she said softly. I have killed enemies who thought themselves my superior, but I have never been as frightened as I am now. Why? Because I have never had something I was afraid to lose. The attack came 3 nights later. Do-hyun was walking through the palace gardens when shadows detached from the walls. 6 figures in black armor, their faces hidden, their weapons gleaming in the starlight. Assassins. The Empress sends her regards, one of them said. They expected an easy kill. A wounded human, barely recovered from the trial, alone in unfamiliar territory. This would be simple. It was not simple. Do-hyun had trained for ambushes. He had survived the Korath. He had passed the trial of blood. These assassins were good, but they had underestimated him. He killed 2 of them before they realized their mistake. He used the garden's terrain, the benches and fountains, and decorative pillars, to limit how many could attack at once. He fought with stolen weapons, desperate improvisation, and the cold fury of a man who refused to die. When palace guards finally arrived, 4 assassins lay dead. The remaining 2 fled into the night. Do-hyun stood among the bodies, bleeding from a dozen wounds. Find Princess Yuna, he said. Make sure she's safe. She was safe. But when she arrived at the garden and saw Do-hyun surrounded by corpses, something changed in her eyes. The careful princess mask cracked completely. Mother, she whispered. She did this. We can't prove it. I know she did it. Yuna's hands clenched into fists. I will confront her. I will. No. Do-hyun stepped forward and took her shoulders. That's what she wants. If you accuse her without proof, she wins. She isolates you. She makes you look like a foolish girl controlled by a human. Then what do we do? Do-hyun smiled grimly. We find proof. What followed was weeks of careful investigation. Do-hyun worked with Unji, his sister, who had traveled to the Valorian throne world to support him. Her engineering skills proved useful for analyzing the assassin's equipment. They traced the weapons to a black market supplier. They traced the supplier to a noble house that owed debts to the Empress. They traced the debts to payments that could only have come from royal accounts. But proof was not enough. Soren was too powerful to be brought down by evidence alone. She would simply destroy anyone who tried to use it. They needed allies. Do-hyun began to talk to other Valorian nobles. Not directly. That would be too obvious. Instead, he let his presence speak. He attended functions. He showed respect for Valorian traditions. He demonstrated that a human could understand their culture, their values, their way of seeing the universe. Some nobles were disgusted by him. Others were curious. A few, quietly, were impressed. The empire is changing, one ancient lord told him privately. We have ruled through strength for millennia, but strength alone cannot sustain us forever. Perhaps new blood is needed. Meanwhile, something else was happening. The Korath Syndicate, defeated at Harim, had regrouped. Intelligence reports suggested they were planning a massive assault. Not on Terran colonies, but on Valorian interests. Someone was funding them. Someone was pointing them at targets. Do-hyun realized the truth before anyone else. Soren was playing a dangerous game. She was using the Korath to create a crisis. A war that would distract from internal politics. In war, she could eliminate Do-hyun legally. She could send him into battles designed to kill him. She could reclaim her daughter for a proper Valorian match. She's willing to sacrifice her own people, Yuna said when Do-hyun explained his theory. She's willing to start a war just to get rid of you. Not just me. She wants to reset the board, put humanity back in its place, remind everyone that Valorians are superior. Do-hyun's jaw tightened. We have to expose her before she can start that war. How? We give her what she wants. We make her think she's winning. And when she overreaches, we'll be ready. The trap was delicate. Do-hyun allowed word to spread that he was growing frustrated. That he was considering leaving the Valorian throne world. That perhaps the union with Yuna was impossible after all. Soren watched and waited. When she was confident that Do-hyun was weakening, she made her move. She announced a grand celebration. A gathering of all the noble houses. At this celebration, she declared, Princess Yuna would choose a proper Valorian consort. The human experiment was over, but Soren had made a mistake. She had invited witnesses from across the galaxy, including Terran diplomats and independent observers. She wanted the humiliation to be public. She did not expect Do-hyun to have evidence of her conspiracy with the Korath. She did not expect other noble houses to have grown tired of her manipulation. She did not expect her own daughter to stand before the assembled nobility and denounce her mother's crimes. The celebration became a trial. Evidence was presented. Nobles who had been secretly working with Do-hyun stepped forward. Communications between the Empress and Korath leaders were displayed for all to see. Soren fought back. She was powerful, experienced, brilliant. But she was also alone. The allies she thought she had were gone. Bought, or convinced, or simply tired of her tyranny. You would tear apart our empire for a human? She demanded of her daughter. Yuna stood straight and tall. I would tear apart corruption for my people. The human showed me what true strength looks like. It is not cruelty. It is not manipulation. It is the courage to do what is right, even when it costs everything. The noble houses voted. Empress Soren was stripped of her authority. She would live, but she would rule nothing. The throne passed to Yuna, earlier than anyone had expected. In the chaos that followed, Do-hyun found himself standing beside the woman who would now lead one of the galaxy's greatest powers. You saved my empire, Yuna said quietly. We saved each other. She took his hand. Then let us save the galaxy together. The wedding was announced the next day. Human and Valorian. Commander and Empress. Two species that had never joined this way. Now bound by something stronger than politics or tradition, the galaxy would never be the same. The wedding was watched by billions. Across human colonies and Valorian worlds. Across neutral stations and ancient empires. Beings of every species turned their eyes toward the throne world. They watched a human man walk down an aisle of white stone, past pillars that had stood for 10,000 years, toward a woman made of silver and starlight. Kang Do-hyun wore the uniform of a Terran fleet commander. He had refused Valorian ceremonial armor. He would marry as what he was. A human. Yuna waited at the altar in a gown that flowed like liquid moonlight. The crown of the Valorian Empress rested on her white hair. Her golden eyes never left Do-hyun as he approached. Admiral Park Ji-seok stood among the human delegation, tears running down his weathered face. He had lost a son long ago. He had found another in this young man from the mining pits. Yoonji smiled through her own tears. Her brother had done the impossible. He had reached the stars. The ceremony was simple by Valorian standards. Ancient words were spoken. Vows were exchanged. Two hands clasped together, silver and pale. And the galaxy shifted. When it was done, Do-hyun turned to face the assembled witnesses. He saw Valorians who still hated him. He saw humans who thought he had abandoned his own kind. He saw representatives of 100 species who did not know what to make of this union. He did not speak to any of them. Instead, he looked at his wife, his empress, and smiled. I came back, he said quietly. Just like I promised. Yuna's mask cracked. Not the cold mask of politics, but something else. The armor she had worn her entire life. The walls that protected her heart. All of it fell away for just a moment. You did, she whispered. You actually did. The celebration lasted for 3 days. Feasts and ceremonies and diplomatic functions blurred together. Do-hyun shook hands with beings he had once studied as potential enemies. He received congratulations from people who clearly wished him dead. Through it all, Yuna was beside him. They did not speak much during the public events. They did not need to. Their hands would find each other under tables. Quick touches that meant more than words. On the third night, they finally escaped. They went to the observation deck where they had reunited at the summit of thorns years ago. The same dying star burned in the distance, a little dimmer now. The universe continued its slow dance around them. It doesn't feel real, Yuna admitted. Everything I've known is changing. My mother is gone. I am Empress now. And I am married to a human. Having regrets? She turned to look at him. In the red starlight, her silver skin glowed like embers. Never. I am simply adjusting. Do-hyun leaned against the railing. The galaxy won't accept this easily. Your people think you've betrayed them. My people think I've forgotten where I came from. We'll spend the rest of our lives proving ourselves. I know. There will be assassination attempts, political crises, wars that try to tear us apart. I know. Do-hyun smiled. Good. I wanted to make sure you understood what you were getting into. Yuna laughed. It was not the cold laugh of a princess. It was warm and surprised. The laugh of a woman who had found something she never expected. You are impossible, she said. I tell you we face endless danger. And you smile. I've been facing endless danger since the day I left Harem 4. The difference is that now I'm not facing it alone. They stood together in silence, watching the dying star. Do you remember what you told me? Yuna asked finally. That night before I left your colony, you said you wanted to see you again. I remember. I laughed at you. I thought you were a foolish boy who didn't understand the universe. She turned to face him fully. I was wrong. You understood better than I did. What do you mean? Yuna reached up and touched his face. Her fingers traced the scars he had earned in the trial of blood, the lines of exhaustion from years of war. You understood that the universe rewards those who refuse to accept its limits. You understood that being told something is impossible is not a reason to stop. It is a reason to try harder. She smiled. You taught me that, Kang Do-hyun. A mining boy from a forgotten colony taught a princess how to dream. Do-hyun covered her hand with his own. You know why I did all of this? The training, the battles, the trials? To become worthy. No, he shook his head. I did it to become worthy of myself. To prove that I was more than what the universe said I could be. You showed me that was possible. You looked at a boy covered in dust and saw someone worth challenging. He stepped closer. Their foreheads touched. Silver and pale. Alien and human. Empress and commander. I didn't come here to conquer you, he said softly. I came here to stand beside you. That's all I ever wanted. Yuna closed her eyes. And that is why I chose you. That is why I will always choose you. They stayed on the observation deck until the dying star set below the horizon. They talked about their future, about the children they might have, a new species perhaps, a bridge between peoples, about the reforms they would bring to the empire, about the alliances they would build with humanity, about the galaxy they would shape together. Far away, on Harem 4, an old man looked up at the night sky. Do-hyun's father did not fully understand what his son had become. But he knew the stories. He knew that a boy who had once dug rocks from the ground now stood beside an empress. Crazy kid, he muttered, but he was smiling. Across Terran space, children heard the story of the ghost of Harem. They learned how a human had passed the trial of blood. They learned that the universe was not as closed as it seemed, that there were no limits except the ones you accepted. They began to dream, and in the Valorian palace, Kang Do-hyun woke beside his wife as the morning light streamed through crystal windows. Yuna's silver hair spread across the pillow like spilled moonlight. Her face was peaceful in sleep. He watched her for a long moment. 10 years ago, he had been a boy in a mining pit, looking up at ships he thought he would never touch. 10 years ago, a princess had told him to become something worthy. He had listened. The path had been hard. He had lost friends and pieces of himself. He had done things that haunted him. He had become something that the boy in the pit would barely recognize, but he had also found something. Purpose. Love. A place in a galaxy that had tried to convince him he was nothing. Yuna stirred. Her golden eyes opened and found his. "You're watching me sleep," she murmured. "That's strange. I'm memorizing your face. You've seen my face many times. I plan to see it many more." Do-hyun leaned down and kissed her forehead. "I plan to see it every morning for the rest of my life." Yuna smiled. It was the smile she showed only to him, unguarded and real. "Acceptable," she said. "Now come back to bed. We have a galaxy to change. But it can wait a few more hours." Do-hyun laughed and lay down beside her. Outside the window, the stars burned bright and eternal. They did not care about the small dramas of mortals. They did not care about empires, or species, or love. But for two people in a palace of silver and light, the stars felt closer than they ever had before. The boy had become a man. The man had come back to claim his princess. And together, they would show the universe what humans were capable of. This was not an ending. It was a beginning.